The warehouse, the distribution center in Staten Island voted today positively, affirmatively for the Amazon labor union. So congratulations. That's an incredible development. I'm so happy to see that these monopolies, these huge corporations, these huge service industry corporations, this dominant trend in the imperialist system economically, that there is this push to unionize. We see it at Starbucks, now Amazon. There was that failure a little while ago within the last year or so in Bessemer. I know they're continuing to try through the RSDSW. But this independent labor union in Staten Island has actually been able to win some real results. So in the election, they actually counted today. I think they had somewhere about 400 more votes positively than negatively. So in effect, they've won. They've won union recognition. However, and this is what I want to talk to you about before I get into the story about AOC and how she has handled herself and how the squad has handled themselves in this moment. I just want to say, and I hope, I really do want to talk to Chris Smalls. He seems like a great guy. So hopefully I can get him on the program at some point. But the union effort, any union organizing campaign. I've been part of unions as a member. My wife was an organizer for a while, so I've learned a lot from her. I actually did union semester program at CUNY as well. You know, organizers, we're teaching that course. We're teaching courses there. So I've learned a lot about labor organizing over the years. Been a shop steward many times, but I've never organized one on my own. But I'm married to someone who did it for like 7 years. So I have some base knowledge about this. And I've done a lot of research and study about labor law. And one of the things that the Amazon Labor Union is going to confront now that it has won formally recognition is that the NLRB, the Taft-Hartley Act, right? This was the Taft-Hartley Act. This was I think it was 1949. Was it? 1947. Sorry. Right after these huge gains, these millions of workers on strike, pushing for progressive policy, the Taft-Hartley Act was passed as a response. It was an anti-communist measure. It was a measure to purge the most radical elements of the labor movement into just obscurity. It was meant to destroy the radical tradition of organized labor during the industrial labor movement in the United States. And it succeeded in a lot of ways. And one of the ways it did so was it barred and banned a lot of the most militant actions that labor unions could participate in, from a general strike, right? The strike was actually limited now to only during the collective bargaining agreement periods. Solidarity strikes were barred, made illegal. Boycotts were made illegal, right? A lot of actions by unions that in labor workers that they could take to win power were actually made illegal. And then, of course, being a communist was literally made illegal to this day because of the Taft-Hartley Act. A lot of unions still adhere to this very outdated measure that people have to sign cards saying they're not a member of the Communist Party. So nonetheless, one of the barriers that Taft-Hartley presented to the working class was the formation of the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board. This is basically a judicial system that Washington appoints that litigates between employers and workers. And it always favors employers. It always favors the bosses because it's literally appointed by the very forces that are controlled by the bosses, by employers, politicians, right? So Washington and it effectively has become an arbiter of labor unions. And what happens is that labor law allows employers to continue to appeal and appeal and delay and delay. So that's what's likely to happen here. I would really like to hear what the organizers are thinking from here on out about how this will play out, but it's almost a guarantee that Amazon will not forfeit and say, hey, we recognize these results. They're likely to continue to appeal it and try to bleed the workers dry, try to continue the anti-union campaign and move people to the anti-union stance as this is litigated by the NLRB, as there's appeals, injunctions put in by Amazon, hoping to really deflate the organizing efforts. And so I'm very curious about how this will play out, because even though recognition has been formally won, there's still mechanisms that Amazon could use to make problems for the workers. And so it is my hope that the organizing continues and that the pressure is put on, right? It is most likely that even if a union is recognized at Amazon, that Amazon will not meet the demands through negotiation, right? There won't be some nice talk at the table with Amazon saying, okay, we'll give you wage increases, improvement of working conditions. I know that's a big one because Amazon workers literally die at these warehouses, right? They piss in bottles, they die of heart attacks because they're being overworked. Improving healthcare, all of that, vacation, all of these bread and butter. Uh, but it's likely that Amazon won't meet these conditions. And so during the collective bargaining period, you can strike. And so there will have to be a lot of organizing, probably around a strike. That would be huge. That would be monumental to see a strike at an Amazon employer, at an Amazon warehouse. And I hope we do see it. But of course, a lot of this is in the future, right? What will happen in the future. But right now, it is a huge deal that Amazon workers in any location have voted to recognize a union representation. Employers always say, oh, we don't want to negotiate with the third party. No, workers are the union. And this Amazon labor union drive shows it. It is Amazon workers organizing their own union, trying to drive it through with community power and support and solidarity. And so, really, tip of the hat to probably what is one of the most difficult places, if not the most difficult place, to try to organize a union, given Amazon's stature in this imperialist system, right? It is literally really in the vanguard of this imperialist system. It is the economic force which has tentacles everywhere, from military intelligence, high tech, and of course, it has seeped into almost every area of economic life for working people. So it is a behemoth, and it is great that we're seeing this. So my solidarity and my hat goes to the Amazon workers, and I'm going to continue to follow the situation because I do want to definitely cover it and see it materialize into the best possible outcome. And so, yeah, the struggle continues. But I want to talk about something with regard to Amazon and the workers who are unionizing. So, a lot of people know Chris Smalls, right? He's the leader of the Amazon Labor Union. He's been very vocal about the limitations of the Democratic Party, and including the progressives in the squad, etc. We saw Jordan Sheridan, who I said before, Respect His Journalism, has been doing a lot of great coverage on this. And as these votes were being tallied over the last day or so, we see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez come out and say she supports this. And I'm going to pull up the Twitter thread about this because this is a great thread that kind of demonstrates why the Democratic Party isn't a friend of working people. And actually, it is a really dangerous opponent of working people, given that it attempts to pose as a friend, and it attempts to bring working people, working class people, oppressed people into its graveyard of social movements. So here's the Twitter thread, AOC, right? This was yesterday. Muscles. Because look, they're winning. 15-18, yes. 11-54, no. I think the results even got better. So here's Crystal Ball, who says, here's the guy, and she means Chris Smalls, who I guess was on her program with Kyle Kalinske. Here's the guy who organized the union drive, talking about how you left them high and dry. These are your constituents, and you couldn't be bothered to show up until they're on the cusp of victory. So actually, this was a story reported in January that the Amazon Labor Union in Staten Island had asked, right, in New York, had asked that AOC come and support them, and she said no, or at least she left them high and dry. So look at what AOC has to say here. AOC says that the warehouse isn't in my district, and maybe you should look at a map. I mean, this is just straight fire that she's trying to spit back at Crystal Ball. Look at a map before claiming that it's in my district. One scheduling conflict aside, I mean, she sounds actually super elitist here. I mean, if this were an in-person conversation, I don't think I would be able to have it with AOC if someone was talking to me like this, right? She's literally in some kind of Twitter personality mode, and it's disgusting. So, one scheduling conflict aside, we have requested oversight, blah, blah, blah. We've done this, we've oversight, met with Amazon workers in Woodside, right? In Woodside and more. Hope you do due diligence next time, more due diligence. Oof. So Jordan comes in and he said, I was told by workers that your folks told them at last minute it was a security issue, not a scheduling conflict. So she's not even getting her own story right. Whether you're in, whether it's your district or not, you would think a New York congressperson would have tweeted support, particularly in the final weeks for one of the most important union drives. And then she says security was an issue as well. 2021 included high level threats on my life. So here we go again. AOC and the squad, they're under threat, so they can't do anything, I guess, is the narrative. It limited what activities I was able to do, especially those outside. The combination of that, plus when we were able to get resources, time. Okay, I'm bored now. To secure them creates scheduling and logistics conflicts. So I'm actually Chris Smalls. I don't see it here, but Chris Smalls actually responded to this. If I can't find it, that's fine. But she didn't respond to Chris Smalls either, right? She didn't respond to him. She didn't give him the time of day. But think about that. Think about that attitude there, saying that there was a scheduling conflict, there were security issues. That's why I couldn't tweet out support. And this goes back all the way to force the vote. This goes back to Medicare for all. This goes back to the very reason the squad AOC was elected. It was to fight for positive, progressive, left political change. It was to fight for policies that are popular among wide ranges of the wide majority of the population. Right. This was why they were elected. And when someone calls them to account, like even Crystal Ball or Jordan Sheridan did there, pretty basically. I mean, this wasn't some kind of militant pitchfork effort by these folks. These journalists were literally just saying, how about you listen to the leader of this union who's saying you actually didn't support them? How about you actually tweet out support, use your popularity for good, support these workers in a real legitimate way, in a material way? Why not? And AOC cannot help but say, no, I can't because I have security concerns. I can't go out because my life is threatened. I can't do it because, um, I have scheduling conflicts, right? All of this is just excuses. And this is what we have, right, for a so-called progressive wing of the Democratic Party. We really just have excuses. And it isn't to say that AOC and the squad can on their own really push things very far inside of Congress and inside of a White House that is literally geared toward reproducing the capitalist and imperialist system, right? This neoliberal order. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they could be. This is theoretical. This is not the Marxist analysis. This is theoretical. This is the hypothetical. They could legitimately, right, make such a ruckus, make such a fuss, demand the impossible, as people like Pelosi would say that these ideas or policies are impossible, demand it, and have those who support them really be the agents of change who say, okay, well, at least the person we voted in is saying they're fighting for this. So now we will fight for it. We will make it so it is very difficult for the establishment to ignore these things, to not make them happen. But what has the squad done? Well, they haven't done that at all. They just continue to tweet out and say they support Medicare for all and they support student loan cancellation. And what would this mean for your family? But then they just go back to business and maybe they'll vote positively on some things and negatively on others, but it really doesn't make a material impact. It doesn't change the political situation. It really just maintains the status quo. And here you have AOC literally talking down to journalists who are not in positions of political power. They have some influence, I guess Crystal Ball a little bit more because she works for The Hill than Jordan Sheridan. Both of them have a modicum of influence within journalist circles and people who follow independent media, but they're not AOC. They're not people who have literally tens of millions of followers on social media. They're not people who have tens of millions of people who support them, who would listen to them if there was something that they could do to support the efforts of the squad to get things done. But that's not the point, because the Marxist analysis, right, the actual analysis of this situation is that they don't want to because they're not in a situation to want to, right? It's not about what their ideas are in their head, it's what the reality of the state and the party, right, the organ of the state that they serve, this Democratic Party, it's what its very nature is, right? Its very character, everything that it is about forwarding the agenda of endless war and austerity. Even if it says, okay, we can absorb some of these so-called progressives in, we can allow them to win an election or two here and there, right? We'll allow that. We'll make it very difficult, but we'll allow it for some in some areas. That's fine, but they can come in and they can have their careers, but they're not going to shake things up. That's who really rules, right? It's those forces who dictate politics in that manner, right? It's the Pelosi's, it's the Schumers, and then it's their donors, it's the ruling class. That's who rules. The AOC and the squad, they're just along for the ride at this point, right? They rode the wave of progressive and leftist sentiment, of grassroots progressive and leftist sentiment, and they've exploited it for their gain, but they have no interest, and they've already shown it. They don't have any interest in moving the needle further, of even perhaps committing class suicide, to quote Amilcar Cabral, because class suicide would be, well, we're going to fight for our political principles and our program that got us elected to the point where it's actually going to nuke our political careers. And that may actually do a lot more for the political situation and the left in the United States than what they're doing now, which is just following the status quo, towing the line, trying to do virtue signaling like you saw in that tweet, right? Muscles, strong, working people. Yeah. But then, of course, there's the history that Crystal Ball and Jordan Sheridan brought up, which says, well, actually, you're not pulling your weight in helping the Amazon workers unionize. How much of a difference would it be financially in terms of resources? Because independent labor unions, they don't have an international union when they are willing to give support to more militant activities, but they don't have an international, or national more so, but it's called the international is what the big unions are called. They don't have an international to support the local effort, right? What would it mean for AOC to come out and support for them, right? Actively. For over the last few weeks, she could have been tweeting, live tweeting, hey, look what's happening here. I'm not even there. Maybe I can't be there, but look what's happening. Look at the rallies. Look at what they're doing. Look what they're asking for. And you should support them. What would that mean? I think she has about 13 million followers, something like that on Twitter. Um, she has many more millions on Instagram and other places. What would it mean just for that alone? It probably would have helped the campaign enormously, but she didn't do it. Instead, she got into a Twitter argument with journalists who are outside of the corporate media sphere. She got into them in this like kind of smug, almost triggered way. And it's unfortunate in some ways, but it's revealing in others, right? It reveals to us the character of the Democratic Party. It's a corporate party, it's an imperialist party, it's a party of capital. Anyone who calls themselves progressives and who stays in that party is betraying anything that could be called progressive. You stay in that party, you are that party, you become the party, and that party ultimately continues on with its agenda because uh, AOC and the squad, I mean, they're not even trying to challenge it, right? And it's even worse on foreign policy, right? I think AOC deleted a tweet opposing sanctions against Russia. You saw Bernie Sanders, the kind of leader of the pack of the squad, come out and literally demand sanctions on Russia during the military operation. You've had AOC and the squad support sanctions on places like Cambodia. You've had them fail to challenge real U.S. military efforts in Syria and other places, right? They're absolutely horrific. You have AOC going to her so-called Chinese constituents in Queens and saying, oh, yeah, no, I support Tibet, right? Like I support Tibet independence, literally peddling the Dalai Lama and the CIA's line on that. and their war of interference that they waged in the 1950s, literally supporting that kind of monstrosity. I don't know if you remember AOC in 2019 signing on a letter with Ted Cruz for so-called democracy in Hong Kong. I mean, this was a complete and utter, I think, just example of how AOC is willing to drop her so-called rivalry with Ted Cruz, her disagreements with Ted Cruz in order to demonize and lambast China over what was an NED, National Endowment for Democracy, sponsored proxy war on China and Hong Kong, which China was able to stabilize and ultimately defeat. And so that's AOC, right? And so you see here, AOC continues on with the trend of talking progressive on the one hand, while actually walking the line and following the status quo on the other by essentially ignoring the Amazon Workers Union campaign on Staten Island up until today. And then when called out for it, doubles down and says, actually, I've been doing a lot and you need to do your due diligence and you need to stop questioning me because, as Jay-Z once said, right? This capitalist, black capitalist nightmare, Jay-Z, he said that to Harry Belafonte, right? This was early in the Obama period. He said to Harry Belafonte, legendary left-wing revolutionary Harry Belafonte, that his existence is charity. And that's how AOC and the squad believes of themselves. That's what they believe of themselves. That their existence in Congress, that their existence as the squad, as politicians, as Democrats who are talking maybe a little bit more of a left political line, that their existence is enough and that you should believe that existence to be charity. You should feel good about it and you should be silent when they do what AOC did here, which is to ultimately betray the principles that they supposedly espouse and honestly follow some of the principles that they actually espouse on the reactionary end, which is they're much more enthusiastic about sanctions on Cambodia, and AOC was very enthusiastic about the proxy war on China and Hong Kong than she was about the Amazon workers union organizing campaign.